All right, let's get right into it. Some ideas are so fundamental, they're basically the operating system for our entire society. They just run in the background. Today, we're digging into one of the biggest ones, the social contract. And the question we're asking is, well, is this old piece of code desperately in need of an update for the world we actually live in today?
And really, everything boils down to this one simple question. When you've got a problem that completely ignores passports and border lines, who's actually in charge? Who gets to call the shots? This is, without a doubt, the central puzzle of our time.
And look, this isn't just some abstract philosophical thing. We've all just lived through this. Pandemics that bring the entire planet to a screeching halt. A climate that's changing for everyone, no matter where you live. Supply chains that snap and suddenly you can't get what you need. And you've got these giant corporations that are more powerful than many countries. These problems are global, and it's becoming painfully obvious that the old rulebook just doesn't cut it anymore.
So, what is going on here? Well, these aren't just a handful of separate crises that happened by chance. They're all symptoms of a much deeper issue, a fundamental glitch, you could say, in our global operating system.
Here's the core of it. Our global problems have simply outgrown our political rulebook. The blueprint we've been using to organize ourselves was built for a world of separate individual countries. But today's problems are bigger than that, and the tools we have just aren't up to the job. So to really get why that blueprint is failing, we have to go back and look at the original source code. Let's meet the three key architects who, centuries ago, designed the very ideas of society and government that we still live with today. Okay, so here are our three main architects. And what's wild is how differently they saw human nature. You've got Hobbes, who was, let's say, a pessimist. He thought we needed a really tough boss to keep us from destroying each other. Then there's Locke, way more optimistic. He's like, no, we just need a fair referee to protect the rights we're all born with. And then you have Rousseau, the total idealist, who believed we're all noble savages at heart and can govern ourselves. I mean, think about it. This debate between the tough boss, the fair referee, and direct democracy, that's basically the source code for almost every political argument we still have today. And this quote just perfectly captures Hobbes' worldview. This is his description of life without a strong government holding everything together. It's pretty terrifying, right? And it totally explains why he believed people would gladly give up almost all their freedom just to get a little bit of order and safety. So these ideas were absolute game changers for building nations. But what happens when you try to scale them up, to stretch them across the entire planet? Well, that's where you start to see the cracks in the foundation. Okay, so here's exactly where the old blueprint starts to fall apart. First, and this is the big one, there's no global sovereign, right? No world government, no tough boss to call the shots. Second, how in the world do you get the consent of the governed from 8 billion people? You just can't. Then you've got these huge power imbalances between countries that make any kind of fair deal almost impossible from the get-go. And of course, as we said, problems like climate change don't care about our maps. And finally, you've got these massive non-state actors, think giant corporations, that are playing by a totally different set of rules, if any. To put it as simply as possible, the old contract was built for a world of walls, separating one nation from another. But we live in a world of webs, all tangled and interconnected. The design is just fundamentally out of date. Okay, so if the old contract is busted, what's next? Can we even imagine a new one? A kind of global social contract 2.0? Let's take a look at what the main features of that new global handshake might actually be. Now, any new contract would have to start with this idea right here, global distributive justice. And this isn't about charity. This is the really radical idea that fairness in how we share resources, opportunities, everything shouldn't just stop at a country's border. It's about justice for every single person on the planet. This is such a powerful way to think about it, from the philosopher John Rawls. Imagine you're about to be born, but you don't know where. You could be born in the wealthiest nation or the poorest. Now, what kind of rules would you make for the world? You'd probably design a much fairer system, right? Just in case. This really gets to the core of what global justice is all about. And it's not just about what's decided, it's about how it's decided. The process itself has to be fair. So for any global system to be seen as legitimate, it needs what's called procedural justice. That means everyone, especially smaller nations, gets a real voice. It means global institutions like the UN have to be transparent. And maybe most importantly, the rules have to apply to everybody equally, from the tiniest island nation to the most powerful corporation. But look, drafting a new contract like this isn't just some technical challenge. It's a moral one. It forces all of us to wrestle with some of the most difficult ethical questions that we as a species have ever faced.
This one is huge. How do we come up with universal human rights that apply to everyone, everywhere, without steamrolling the incredible diversity of cultures and traditions that make our world so rich? It's a really tough balancing act.
And this question gets right to the heart of responsibility. Is aid from wealthy countries just a nice act of charity, or is it a moral duty, an obligation that comes from history and the way the global economy is structured? A new contract would have to give a real answer to that. This might be the thorniest question of all. At what point does a tragedy inside one country become the whole world's problem? When does the global community have a responsibility to step in and protect people from atrocities, even if it means violating a nation's sovereignty? There are no easy answers here. And all of this brings us to one last thing to think about. If you had to create just one rule, one single principle for a new global social contract that every person on Earth could actually agree on, what would it be? Just think about that for a second. The fact that it's so hard to answer that simple question, well, that shows you just how big this challenge really is.